All right, everyone, welcome in. My name is Julia Fernandez, and I'm a co-founder of Students of UXD alongside my partner in crime, Vicky Bo. Say hi, Vicky. And she is an amazing human being, along with the other amazing human beings in our team. We're so excited to be with you all today. And our team is these beautiful people, just models. So we have Amanda, our copywriter. She's over here as well. Make yourself known. Rohan, our outreach coordinator. Kendra, our social media coordinator. Donald, our events coordinator. And Mahogany, our content strategist. Now, we always like to talk about who we are in the beginning of our events. We always like to remember why we started Students of UXD. And so for those of you who haven't heard of us before, we're Students of UXD, an all student run organization for students of UX design of all ages. So it doesn't matter if you're a junior designer, someone who is already professional, we are all students and we're all learning something new every single day. Our mission is just to create an engaging community for students of all ages who want to pursue this wonderful world of UX design. And in addition to that, we love having events like these, but also amplifying voices in our community and also shedding light to relevant events in the community, such as Black History Month. So this month we have really awesome features to celebrate and pay our tribute. Students of UXD will be highlighting Black UX designers and resources in our community all throughout the month of February. So keep an eye out for a Black History Month post tributes on LinkedIn or on Instagram as well. Next, we have a very exciting event. Make sure to sign up for our next event, How Cognitive Biases Influence Users' Decisions. Make sure to sign up on our website because our events can get sold out now. So make sure you grab a spot. And finally, we always love to hear about what you're learning and taking away from these events. Please go ahead and tag us at Students of UXD and hashtag SOUXD. Tag us, tag our speakers, and let us know what things you took away from this event, and make sure to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. All right. Now, a little bit of an intro to this event. So we are very excited because today we're going to talk about what the working relationship between PMs and designers are. We're going to get an introduction on how PMs and designers can work together effectively with Christine, Shuyi, and Kevin. So Christine is a design manager at LinkedIn and is currently managing a team of designers on the Pages product. This product enables organizations to create an online presence on LinkedIn. We also have Shuyi, and Shuyi is a senior product manager at LinkedIn. She is currently leading a team to work across the careers product by creating a LinkedIn talent marketplace, skill assessments, and candidate matching experience. And last but not least, we have Kevin. Kevin is a senior UX designer at LinkedIn. He is leading the design experience for LinkedIn Live, which is a new broadcast experience on LinkedIn. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our speakers. Give them a warm welcome in the chat, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you for that lovely energy, Julia. That was like an amazing introduction. So really appreciate it. And we are so honored to be here today to talk to all of you guys, the students of UXD. I think this is a really wonderful organization bringing together folks from all different parts of your career journeys. And we're happy to share more of that information with you. So like Julia said, today there's a group of us from LinkedIn, and we're here to talk to you more about what it's like working between designers and product managers. So just another quick introduction of myself. So like Julia said, my name is Christine. I'm a design manager at LinkedIn. I've been at the company for 4 years, but what folks might not know about me is that actually I'm also a career shifter. So I studied business in my undergrad, and I worked in consulting for 5 years before I discovered that there was a field of UX design out there. And I was really interested and decided to make my pivot by going back to graduate school. So I went to California College of the Arts in San Francisco and did a 1-year master's there, and then ended up at LinkedIn as a UX designer, and have worked my way up since then. So that's more about my journey. And then I'll hand it off to Kevin to do a quick intro.
Hey all, my name is Kevin. Thanks again for the wonderful intro. Yeah, so I work on the live video team. I've worked at LinkedIn for about 3 years. In my journey into design, I originally went to school for computer animation at FIT in New York. And from there, I took one interaction design course because they had this, our degree was like computer animation and interactive media. And like to get the interactive media into the degree, there was like one course in UX design. And I took that one course, and that's when I really decided, like, I was like, I don't really want to do computer animation. I want to do this. So my first job was just, I walked into an internship and it was just like, I totally know what I'm doing. I'm definitely a designer. And they hired me, I mean, as an unpaid internship, but I had no idea what I was doing. Like, never designed a website in my life. And I really just learned on the spot there. And then from there, I continued to work in other companies and startups till I arrived here at LinkedIn today. So anyone can really become a designer. Anyone can get into this. I'll hand it off to Shu.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, I'm Shi. I'm so excited to be here today with you all. And I am a product manager at LinkedIn. I've been here for about 3 years now at LinkedIn, but I have been a product manager for, it's coming up on the last 8 years or so. And my journey into product was also not one that I would have chosen for myself from the very beginning. I actually majored in classical linguistics in college. So I had thought that I was going to be a teacher, actually, but found my way into a startup, transitioned from product marketing, and it has been fairly smooth sailing ever since. But yeah, super excited to just talk about the relationship between product managers and how we work with our design partners.
Awesome. So to give you guys an overview in terms of the agenda today, so we're just going to cover some high level, what is a product manager? I'm sure some of you have heard about it, maybe even considered it as a field, but Shui is going to give a quick introduction and overview of that. And then we'll talk about the intersectionalities between responsibilities of product and design, and then end with you all with some really tactical tips on facilitation and how to work together, and open it up to Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Shui to kick us off.
All right. So I love that we're so active in the chat. So just in 30 seconds, can you all let me know what you think a PM actually does? And I'll keep an eye out. Anyone? Alignment. Okay, push car. That's a good one. Keeps the project moving, bro. Okay. Oh, it's cheerleader. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. It is. These are actually really great answers. Facilitate timelines, manages the project strategy roadmap. Awesome. Actually, it's a combination of all of these things. Christine, you want to go to the next slide? This is awesome. So the role of product can differ from company to company, but I think a lot of you covered it. Like the simplified definition of what a product manager is someone who owns the business strategy behind the product, but especially its functional requirements. So really sitting within the research and development team that's working with design and engineering to define what is the thing we actually need to build to meet our business objectives. And then once the plan is set, they manage the launch of these features. So yeah, Sarah said strategy, planning, execution. That's exactly right. It is all three things along those lines. And product is really at the center of understanding customer needs. Sometimes you'll hear that be discussed as member needs, user needs, understanding business requirements. Say your CEO of your company is saying, hey, we need to meet our growth objectives by this date. And then also understanding the technology that it takes deeply to get there. So really delineating with engineering and design, like what's possible by when, and what can we actually build versus what can we build at a later date. Next slide, please. And here's an analogy for you. So something that's not on my LinkedIn profile is that I absolutely love food. I plan all my vacations. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but I plan all my vacations around restaurants. And the analogy that I'd like to actually pass on to you is that PMs really, literally my entire, okay, lovely. PMs love to actually run the past. So after we define with our partners what the vision of a product is, we rely on a team of specialists to help ship that product. So today, I don't know deeply what exactly is in the nitty gritty of like engineering, technical architecture, or UX design patterns. But what I really do is I deeply understand what each specialist on our cross-functional team does, so that we can deliver a feature on time. Next slide. And this is one of my favorite slides, actually. PMs exist in all types of roles. So at different companies, they can even be different job titles. So LinkedIn calls my job product manager. There are some companies that call this technical product manager. I believe that at Amazon, Microsoft calls them program managers. At smaller stage companies, they can usually be the CEO or the CTO of the company itself. That's pretty common, actually. You'll usually find that at an early stage company or startup with like 3 people, the CEO is usually playing the role of the PM. And then there are other PMs that actually sit as project managers within consulting agencies. You can also see the word product owner attached to what a PM does. Next slide. But what do product managers really do day to day? It's the where I'll start off. So is at the very beginning of the product development process, we go through a discover phase where we identify problems. Then we work with our design counterparts to actually come up with the potential solutions. Then we walk through development and then deploy the actual feature or product when it's time to launch. So I'll actually break that down for you more granularly. It's a little hard to see this slide, but where we are in the product development process at LinkedIn is actually, like, depending on what my day-to-day looks like, is every single one of these stages, quite literally all the time. So for example, at any given time, I can actually be in the discover phase for one project where we're like, hey, we want to ship, design and ship this email, versus researching something that's a brand new product idea. So I sit, for example, in the LinkedIn Talent Solutions marketplace, and we have some very early stage ideas that I'm working on right now to help job seekers stand out on the basis of their skills and get hired on the basis of their skills versus pedigree. So we're running user research right now to inform whether we want to go after that strategy. Other products are a little later along, where we're actually developing. We're launching something in like 2 months along the lines of skill-based hiring, helping customers make decisions based on the skills people have. And when we're ready to launch that, that's what the deploy phase is all about. In the discover phase, we work with our user research, business operations, data science counterparts to pull in both quantitative and qualitative research to inform the strategy. Then we will pull together what we call strategy documentation. Usually those documents answer the question of how are we playing to win? And are we playing to win in any particular area? Like, let's say LinkedIn was really interested in like healthcare, for example. We would pull together strategy documents on the resources we would need to effectively execute the strategy and the products that we would ship to get there. That dives neatly into planning and roadmap. Would we execute this on a 1-year time horizon or a 2-year time horizon? So that really covers the discover phase, after which we would go into the design phase. And typically I do engage our design partners in every one of these phases, but this is where design really steps into high gear. So after product and business kind of identifies kind of the problems that we need to solve, mapping against the business priorities, we work with UX design to actually identify the solutions. I really see our design partners as people who own the solution. After design pulls together the first prototypes, we do research and validation, and then go into technical design where engineering starts giving feedback and says like, oh, this UX pattern is possible maybe on Android, but not on iOS. It can get even that tactical. Next slide. And then once all the design and the user experience is completely aligned on, everyone agrees, like this is the shared vision that we're going towards. We do code it all up. This is in software development. And then we identify what we call a ramp plan. That might be LinkedIn speak, but really that's just like, how are we launching this thing? At LinkedIn, because it's such a big product that touches so many people, we do launches in what we call ramps. So typically we'll launch to 5% of users globally, test it, and if it's not successful for any reason, we'll ramp it down, retest it. But even before we bring it to users globally, we will also do quality assurance, which is like our whole team will get together, test out the feature, make sure there are no bugs before we launch it to people in our app. And then for any new feature, especially large ones where we're introducing like a new brand out there, we will pull together a go-to-market plan with product marketing. So we'll pull together the marketing strategy with inputs from different stakeholders across the business, and then also let our support team know, hey, if we're going to launch on this date, you might want to look out for like support tickets just to see how it's going. And then in the deploy phase, after you launch a product or after you ramp it externally, product and data science, we work together to evaluate the metrics and the user feedback. So again, there's both a quantitative approach and a qualitative approach the whole way through. So sometimes we'll ship a new button or something on feed or a new page on LinkedIn, and we'll be able to tell quite a lot from the quantitative data, our metrics dashboards on how people are receiving it. But members will also write in and tell us like, hey, we really loved this. This was like unexpectedly delightful. Or did you know that like I am on a slower internet connection and this page actually loads a little slower for me? So that qualitative data can be really important. And then when products have found that product market fit, we do try to grow and encourage people to adopt it, and we kind of iterate on those products along the way. Next slide. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that great products are built by teams with shared principles. It's really important for our whole research and development organization across design, product, and engineering, and our business stakeholders to understand what that shared vision of success looks like. We call it rowing together. If we're all rowing in the same direction, we're able to achieve a lot more than if we were rowing in different ones. And with that, I will pass it off to Kevin.
All right, thanks, Shuyi. Oh yeah, no, it's all good. Cool. So yeah, thanks, Shuyi. That was a really great overview in terms of like what do PMs do at LinkedIn and how they kind of fit into the software development lifecycle. I think as students, we learn a lot about the design process, particularly in the double diamond, but it's kind of hard to see how you work with everybody else around you in product and engineering to see how it pieces together. So what I'm going to cover a little bit more is to what are the responsibilities of PM and design. I'm sure some of you were looking at it, you're like, it feels very close to what we do in the design process, which is mostly true, actually. So the thing is, within working with product and design, there is quite a lot of overlap. When you do work at larger companies, like a place like LinkedIn, product managers is probably your most collaborative partner. You're going to spend a lot of time working with them one-on-one to define the problem, go into research, get feedback, and achieve the goals together around the designs that you're trying to build. And when you kind of think about what we learn in our different respective fields, everyone has like a slightly different focus. Right? In design school and in boot camps and whatnot, you're always learned to be user first, right? We have to design things that are empathetic, that really consider the member use cases. Otherwise, it doesn't have any value. But you know, when people are in the product field, they also have to think about that. But you know, sometimes the primary goal for them is more of thinking about like, okay, how do I drive business goals? How do I gain revenue for the company? How do I adopt more users onto this product? How do we see this thing being successful and growing? But in reality, you know, it's not like we're super siloed and only have to think about one of those things. We actually have to think about each other's roles, because with, you know, when you build a product and design it, yeah, it could be the most beautiful thing, but if it has no business value, it's not going to succeed out in the real world. And the same for product users, right? You can make a lot of money for something if you design a feature, but if users don't find any value in it, you're not going to gain any traction. And then if you think about it even more, we haven't even touched the engineering part of it at all, but that's the third area of the intersection of what we do between thinking about users and business. It's the technology. You also have to think about the feasibility as designers in terms of like whether or not this is even buildable or achievable in that time frame. And where engineering fits in is that they're in the middle of all of this too. So they're thinking about the implementation and the solution, and therefore design, engineering, and product actually all have to play together to think about each other's roles to create successful products. So ultimately, you know, as PMs and designers, like when you work with folks, you actually have to think about all these things to create a quality product, which is ultimately how these companies succeed. So you might want to think about like, well, okay, what goes into making a quality product? So at LinkedIn, we have this framework that you see here on the right. It's like a diagram where it actually shows where the quality for what our ultimate goals is basically in between user, business, and the execution, which is the technology. So I kind of want to open it up to everyone and just have you all think critically, like, do you have an example of a product that isn't quality? And why do you not think that's quality? And if you think back to the diagram that I just showed, usually it means it's missing one of these factors. So I just kind of give some folks some time to pop in some of their perspectives in the Zoom chat here. Reddit, Craigslist, those are interesting ones. High user value, like the design isn't that great, but it still generates a lot of business. So those are very interesting ones. Any other thoughts here? I see LinkedIn is in here. Microsoft Azure, banking apps, TikTok, that's a good one. Facebook, Microsoft Teams. Okay, Kaiser. Interesting. I see some ones here like Instagram and Facebook, which are actually, you know, like considered top tech products. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more if we had more time. Yeah. Another one that I can think of, like for you all, a lot of these examples are really great, but one of the things that comes to mind is like Google Glass. Google Glass was one of those where it was like really cool in terms of like well designed as a product, and technology was like really pushing the future, but it just had no business value. Like it was like very expensive to buy, and it was really hard to adopt, and people just thought it was creepy, so it just never kind of caught on. So anyway. So let's just kind of continue forward. So yeah, so essentially we talked about this, like a quality product is an intersection between these three areas, and design and product has to overlap quite a bit. But you know, when it comes to creating a quality product at a company like LinkedIn, what we really end up dealing with is, because we have to care about these different areas, is that actually it creates tension. between product and design. Everyone has like a particular goal in mind, and sometimes we don't end up seeing eye to eye. So that's where a lot of facilitation and negotiation kinds of comes in play. And I think it's okay. It's totally fine to embrace that tension when you're working with your product managers and your engineering partners, but that's tension is actually what's going to make the product better. It's going to challenge you in terms of your creative thinking to make sure that you're accommodating these different needs to actually make something that is successful for your users at the end of the day. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to talk more about some techniques in terms of working with PMs.
All right, thanks, Christine. So yeah, as we've seen, our roles overlap a lot between product and design. So now I'm going to talk about how we work with PMs. How do we work with these folks? I've worked with a fair amount of PMs in my day. I'm working with 2 right now. That's just how much I love working with PMs. And so what I'll talk about now is some techniques and ways you can really build and foster that relationship. So next slide, Christine. So the first thing I would say when you kick off a relationship with your PM is to really learn how each other works. You could say about this for like any coworker you work with, but because that relationship is so important, just learn how each other works in terms of sometimes I work with a PM that like they want to be really collaborative up front, where we're getting together on like a doc or like a whiteboard. When we actually worked in a physical space, but now it's more like digital whiteboards. But and really just jamming on ideas from the get-go. Some PMs like to really, kind of consolidate their thoughts and then get feedback on them later. So really learn that working style. And how do you like to work too? Like, I've worked with some designers and, myself that likes to be in there really early and collaboratively. And sometimes, a lot of designers are like, let me just go like, consolidate some explorations and thoughts and articulate that later and then get feedback. So really learning that working style. And are you more, methodical or go with the flow? And really don't be afraid to just tell your PM when you kick off a relationship, how you like to work. There was this one project where I started, I was helping out a team and kicking it off, and me and the PM set up a meeting just to do a little intro. And, she just asked me, she's like, how do you like to work with PMs? And I was like, oh, that's delightfully refreshing that you just asked me right away. And it's good because it set that expectation up front. I could be like, well, I like to work really collaboratively, be involved early on in the process. So just having that set up front was really helpful. Next slide, Christine. And yeah, we'll talk about different ways to collaborate, different, like tips and tools for collaborating with your PM. Next slide. So one thing is learning the tools of the trade of the PM, which often is what's called a PRD or a product requirements doc. And they're used in different ways. Some PMs will use them literally like late in the design and development cycle, where you're just saying like, this is what the feature is, this is what it does, here's some designs for it. And then engineers can just kind of understand, and it's literally just documentation. But sometimes PRDs can be used like a little earlier. Sometimes they're also called like one-pagers, when it's like a high-level idea of saying like, we have this idea, we think strategically, and what the value is for the user is this. And what's nice is when you have those docs and they're early on, this is a great space for you to get in there and comment, give some feedback or your thoughts, and really, try to influence the direction there. Also with engineers. So really these documents can be used as a really great like source of truth doc that everyone can kind of come together and ask questions, give feedback, and influence the direction and thinking on that. Same with strategy docs too. A lot of times strategy docs are very like working / living, like they evolve, like there's like 10 iterations of it. I've seen so many strategy docs where it's like, this one's too long, here's the link to the strategy doc V2 after we've gone through it. So learn the tools of the trade of what PMs work with, and then get in there and make sure that you're also commenting too and giving feedback. So next slide. And the flip side of it, you want to make sure that your designs are also accessible. So PMs can also look at early explorations and give feedback too. We use Figma at LinkedIn, and this is really useful because it's all cloud-based. So it's really easy to share. It's really easy to share things early on. PMs can go in there and comment on things. If you don't use Figma and you're using something that's local like Sketch, you could do what we call rolling decks, which is we have a deck where you upload explorations, and similarly like PMs can get in there and comment. Same with engineers as well. And then prototypes too, you know, especially when you have like a long flow, sometimes it's easier for people to understand what that flow is like just by clicking through it rather than having to look at all these screens, and people can kind of get a sense. You know, similarly, like you would, you know, put together like a clickable prototype if you were going to do user testing. It's just as useful for when you're sharing with the team, both engineers and PMs, for them to kind of understand the flow. Next slide, please. And just meetings. It feels like everything's a meeting today in, in the pandemic life. But what we do frequently is we schedule one-on-one meetings and weekly with our product partners. And what's nice is you can use that for anything from catching up, because you know PMs are going to be in different meetings than you are, and you're going to be in different meetings than them. So it's nice to have that sync, get on the same page, you know, every week. But you could also, you know, flexibly use that for scheduled jam time when you want to really, you know, actually focus, especially early in a project when you're like ideating and you're trying to rapidly get through a bunch of different concepts. Open office hours is another one that me and one of my PMs did, especially what was useful about that is that we had office hours where me and my PM would actually invite engineers to come in and ask us questions early on in a project too, with it moving really quickly. That's actually really useful for them. And then we can actually, you know, align on things moving forward, and they can bring up, a lot of times engineers will ask you questions that both you, the PM and designer, have not thought about. And it's really useful to catch that early on. Also, we do a lot of design reviews with like design leadership. So you always want to make sure your product partners are coming with you to that too. Because sometimes design leadership could ask more business specific questions and you might not have the answer right away. So it's really great for your PM to be there and be able to jump in. Next slide. Cool. So I wanted to know from the group, does anyone here have any collaboration tips for things that have worked well? If you've worked on, you know, in the past on any like group projects, or, you know, working in your job in the past? Make room for fun. Yes, yes. Actually, that's a great one. Me and my PM, we have this meeting, or we used to have this meeting called Confab, where we used to bring in product and design together. And it was one part like casual meeting to like share work across different tracks on the same team, where so you could get visibility into what other people are doing. But we also spend the first half to just do like icebreakers and like just socialize and stuff, just so we can kind of get to know each other a little bit more. Miro, yes, it's essential in the pandemic life. You need to be able to whiteboard together. Workshops, yeah, definitely. Cool, these are all great ideas. Yeah, these are all really effective. We do this all the time at LinkedIn. It's great. All right, next slide. So yeah, now let's talk about what it's like working with a good PM. I've worked with, most PMs I've worked with are really great. There's not great ones too, but you know, we'll talk about the working with good PMs. So the thing that's really great about PMs is that, you know, because they're this like nexus of communication on the team and they bring everyone together, they more than anyone have the ability to really affect like the atmosphere and the culture of the team and how everybody works together. So when you're working with a really great PM, like everybody's life is better. What I look for when I work with a good PM is they're really a great facilitator and communicator. They really do try to bring that team together and all those different cross functions and really help you know, make sure that people are up to date and in sync. You know, especially if there's things going on at the leadership level, they help, you know, cascade that information down to the team. I like when PMs personally approach with problems, not necessarily solutions. Like there's sometimes PMs will, you know, come in and just be like, this is the problem, this is what we're doing, rather than leaving it open-ended for everybody to join in. I had a really great example of that is my current PM on a live video when we were, she did what's called a funnel analysis with our data science team, where you basically look through the journey and see, you know, where there were drop-offs from, you know, the end goal. And what was great about that is that her and data science worked together on that, and they came in one of our leads meetings and said, like, this is the funnel analysis. This is exactly where the biggest like drop-off and pain point is. This is the area we're going to focus on. And she didn't say like how we're going to solve it. She just said like, this is where the problem is. And what was great about that is it left it pretty open-ended early on for engineers to have ideas, for design to have ideas, for obviously product have ideas, but everyone can contribute when they are really good at like defining what that problem is and setting the focus for what's more important rather than kind of prescribing solutions. Yeah. So next slide after this. So you're going to have disagreements with your PM. Like it's just unavoidable. It's going to happen. I've never worked with a PM where we have like 100% agreed on everything. That's okay. But it's important to find ways to, work through them. So in the next slide, one thing I would say that's super critical for design is to really be good at framing and really make a persuasive case for if you do disagree with your PM. And really paint that picture about why you think, this direction, whether it's, on a strategy or we should focus on this feature, or whether it's, more in the details about, this is why I think like the hierarchy and the structure of this page should be this way, depending on that, but really articulate what your thinking is and how you came to that decision, because you have to really be able to present that in like a clear way. Your PM understands where you're coming from in that way. And this is less about, resolving conflict, but more about avoiding it. Because if you both understand where your thinking is and how you came to those decisions and why you believe that, then it's a lot easier for you to come to an understanding. In the next slide, the thing is that PMs have to do this too. When they present a strategy, they have to really articulate why and like what's backing that up and what's making that decision. Is it data from, quantitative from analytics, or is it qualitative from user research? What is their thinking behind that? So really, as long as both of you can really frame, you'll have a way to work through that. It's okay, you go to the next slide. So a couple of ways to work through those areas of disagreements. It's okay to say no, like in terms of, just resourcing and bandwidth, like I said, why you don't believe in a certain direction. It's okay. I think a lot of times design feels pressured to say yes to everything, especially on resourcing when you don't have, the bandwidth to do it. Don't stretch yourselves too thin. Like many things in business is coming down to priorities. And if you can't do everything like we'd like to do, because we, of course, we want to be able to design and help everywhere, it's okay to say no and then, have the team make decisions about priorities. Another one is ask the team. Sometimes if you can't get past something, it's good to bring in the team, whether it's something, from user research, or something from data science to help clarify and get their perspectives. That could help too if you both disagree. And like you could bring in, the experts or the people that specialize a little bit more on this, or just like bring in the whole team and get their thoughts on this. I remember like once me and like one of our PMs were like literally arguing over the size of a button. We just like asked the team, to get their opinions, and everybody like went towards like one saying like, oh, it should be like design A instead of B, and like that just helped like clear the room. But another thing we have at LinkedIn is called Escalations, where if you just hit a wall and you both cannot disagree at all, or you agree to disagree, what we do is we put together a doc, and each side puts their point of view, and then that goes up to leadership, and then leadership makes a decision, and then you can both disagree and commit, or agree to commit to whatever the outcome of that decision was. And I haven't seen many design and product escalations at LinkedIn. Like usually PMs and design can, work, like can come to understanding and move forward. But oddly enough, the one I have seen was how I met Christine actually, where my PM on the team, who was not a good PM, implemented something on Christine's product, but like didn't tell me about it. And said like that team's aligned with what we're doing, so this is what I think we should design. I was like you've talked to this team, they're okay with that? And he's like, yeah, don't worry. And I trust my PM. Like you should trust your PM. You should have no reason to believe that they're acting in bad faith. But then later on, Christine reached out to me and was like, hey, so I saw this design like on our experience, like what is this? And I was like, you didn't know about this? And that's actually how Christine and I met. But thankfully the outcome of that, even though it was kind of a weird start to our relationship because it was my PM escalating against Christine, we're actually really good friends now. So that's a fun story. Now I'll hand it off to Christine and she can talk about being the design partner.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and it's just kind of to add my antidote to that story too, because I remember I was visiting the New York City office when we were still, in the Empire State Building. And I like set up a one-on-one with Kevin and like basically confronted him with the design. And that was our first meeting, but yeah, but it's all good. So like I said, conflict is healthy and we're really good friends now. So anyway, so I want to talk a little bit more about like being a good design partner and what does that mean? So because as a designer, we also own equal responsibility too in making sure that the project is set up for success. So some of the things that you can do as a designer is really help with facilitation, right? Because there's a lot of people in the room who's going to have very different opinions about how do you approach the design, what looks good, what is the goal, et cetera, et cetera. And our job as the designer is to actually try to get some sort of consensus because we actually have to make the decision to execute on that design. So some ways that you can do facilitation, when there's a lot of conflict is thinking about doing a brainstorming session. You can do like a workshop. Google has this wonderful design sprint methodology that I would highly recommend folks trying if you haven't done that. Or just like, really setting up your design reviews in a way that you're very pointed around the type of feedback that you want. I think what's important as what I see a lot of junior designers do is sometimes they go in and present their work and then they leave it too open-ended where it's like, what do you guys think? And then you're going to get a million different opinions. So, oh, sorry, if you're not speaking, could you put yourself on mute, please? Awesome. So yeah, and I think what our job is to really, again, just strive for those decisions to be made. So, when you are working as a designer with a PM, like how can you strive for that, right? So one of the first things I always tell junior designers is when you get a PRD, don't take it for surface value. It's sometimes meant to be challenged, right? So make suggestions. The PM doesn't know everything. Yes, they've done their research and they've talked to different stakeholders, but they value our opinions as well. So it's important to think critically about that and provide suggestions to make improvements along the way. The second thing that's important is to communicate and be proactive when you run into trouble. I think a lot of times designers, we tend to want to work it out ourselves. But in reality, you might not have all that information, and it comes off as like we might be the bottleneck in terms of like why engineering hasn't received the design yet. When in reality, it's something else that might be causing that bottleneck. So it's important to just let your managers and your team know so we can support each other. And then the last thing is just raising issues. It's kind of related to this. Like, I had a junior designer who was an intern once on my team, and she received a PRD, and she didn't know how to raise the issues, but she felt like it didn't really settle well with her. So she came and talked to me about it. And then I helped her kind of break down the problem and set her up so that she can go back and have that conversation with her product manager. So now I'm going to hand it off to Shuyi to maybe share some of her stories around what it's like working with a good designer and a bad designer.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, this is the most interesting position I'm in all day, to be in a room full of designers talking about lessons learned from working with good designers and bad designers. I will also say that I've been pretty lucky throughout my career so far. I've worked with some really amazing design counterparts, but in situations where we've had conflict or difficulty collaborating, it's come down to two things for me, and I can give you a couple anonymized examples. One is around storytelling. So some of the more junior designers that I worked with, we really rely on design at LinkedIn. It's completely end to end what our design partners do. So a lot of the time when it's a slightly more junior designer, they may have trouble kind of representing the needs of our organization. So I sit within talent solutions, but frequently we build on the main LinkedIn app. So I really rely on both myself, but also my design counterpart to go to, a team on Profile or all these other teams to tell them, hey, we've come up with these designs, and this is why we're solving this problem this way, and this is why it's important for the future of the company. And good designers typically have a really streamlined way of kind of finding that alignment and telling people what's really important and at the heart of the matter. And then another example about working with a designer who just needed, I think, a little bit more coaching was as a PM, I really speak for like the business objective of any project that I'm on. And a lot of it has to do with understanding what is the optimal user experience to ship with also the technical constraints. So sometimes when there's a lot of back and forth on, hey, this is not possible by this particular launch date, it usually comes down to getting a little bit more experience. And that is definitely stuff that we continually work through. Christine, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I think, just to kind of summarize the essence of this talk is that being a good partner, whether you're in product or design, actually takes a lot of work. And we have like a shared responsibility across our jobs to create like a good, successful product out there. And a lot of the things that we actually talked about in this presentation are soft skills. I don't know if you guys noticed, but we never talked about like having a stellar Figma file or like the best prototype in the world. Like, yes, you definitely need those skills to get your foot in the door, but ultimately to be very successful in your career and to kind of get, climb the ladder per se, is a lot of these facilitation, negotiation, and kind of influence skills that we all talked about. So I want to leave with you all just some things of like a short list of do's and don'ts to consider. So first thing is, ask questions and gather research and data. It always helps to back up your ideas. And it's okay if you can't always get it, but it helps to just have some information to rely on to prove your point. Get feedback early and often and be flexible when things change. I think sometimes junior designers might have like a tendency to have some sort of ego or like a connection deeply with the work that you've done. But in reality, things change really quickly at companies. So you have to be able to drop your designs and change it if it had to be. The same thing with being receptive to your feedback. What's really important about that is being open-ended, but being really careful in terms of how you facilitate and choose the things to execute on in terms of the feedback, and then being proactive and communicative if you need help with the stuff that you're working on. The other thing is, when as a designer thinking about it, don't expect that PMs know your working style. Like everybody is very different. We're introverts, extroverts. We have different priorities in our life going on. It really helps to set those expectations so that you can become a better working partner with each other. And, always have a clear goal in mind too with your designs. Don't go into a design review and just ask for open feedback without a particular objective. What's also important is as product designers, we're hired for our strategy and thinking. So don't just do what you're told. Apply critical thinking, evaluate things. And same thing, if you're dealing with a problem, don't keep those things to yourself. And lastly, if you're getting really stuck, don't spend too much time back and forth trying to resolve the issues. Use escalations, use your manager. So have somebody come in and step in to help you get through these problems. So with that, hopefully you guys learned something new today around like how PMs and designers work together. We saved a good portion of this presentation to do a thoughtful Q&A. So for now, we'd like to just open it up for questions and we can go from there. So thank you all.
All right. That's amazing. Everyone give them like a Zoom round of applause. That was awesome. That was very insightful. And it was really, really cool to be able to see like your different perspectives in the equation. I think that's really awesome to be able to just like get a look into that, especially as a design student. And we have been collecting some questions, and everyone, if you have more questions as well, make sure to add them onto the chat. But I'm gonna go ahead with my first question because I'm like, you all need to be super organized. So I'm really curious, like what each of your favorite task management app is and what you typically use at work. Because I feel like that's something that I'm still trying to figure out, like if it's Google Cal or like, I don't know, Notion or whatever, but I'd love to hear your guys' favorite one.
I think for me, so I just started using Notion. I'm trying to get into it. Honestly, I sometimes just like the simplicity of like a notepad or
Mm,
just like, pulling up a notes document and quickly typing up my thought without having to like figure out the formatting or like which list is this thing in. And that just really helps me move on very quickly. Otherwise, I live by my calendar. Like as a manager, you're in a lot of different meetings, and even as a designer, you do too. I schedule everything, even working time and lunch. So people can't block those out for me. So I have the chance to go and get like food, for example, and then I color code it. So because I have to do a lot of context switching on different topics, I'll use different colors to indicate to me what this meeting might be about and with which team. So that just kind of helps me like think about my focus going in.
that's awesome. Google Cal is my lifeline. So how about both of you, Shui and Kevin?
Yeah, I can go. I use anything and everything. I love to play around. So recently I've been getting into Airtable and Notion, which I think would make our design org so proud. But I have like the real thing that I miss, you guys. I don't know if anyone remembers Wunderlist. I really miss it. I think it
I
was like
remember
okay,
that.
I was sunsetted like a little while ago. I had like my whole to-do list there. I loved the feeling. I don't know if anyone relates, but like of just writing like a task and like crossing it off, like that really brings a sense of like incremental accomplishment to my day. So definitely a big part of my life. So right now, I think the things that I use are between Airtable, just like I was making a joke with my manager last week that I was like porting my life into it and just kind of organizing everything. And then also Notion and my calendar too.
I'm trying to think. What I've actually really enjoyed lately is Google Chrome lets you do tab groupings now. So you can create different groups of tabs and color code them and name them. And that's been like a lifesaver for being able to have different projects and group like different tabs. Like here's my basics, which is like email and like calendar. Here's like the live video project. Here's this, which all has like 50 tabs associated with each one. So that's actually been huge for tab management, which, I feel like we all know the problem of having like a million tabs open for things. So I think that's been a huge one.
I need that. I sound like the target audience of that. So that's awesome. Well, that's really great to hear. It sounds like there's a lot of like similarities in like us like having to depend on our calendars, but it's really cool to hear the different ways that you guys stay organized. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with a question from Allie. Allie asks, is it typical for designers to help out with putting together the PRD, or is that typically owned by PMs?
I can start and maybe I'll pass it off to Kevin. I always think a PM can own the actual spec. Like they're responsible for actually like just putting together like the high level problem we're trying to solve, but a lot of the time it can be open ended. So a lot of PMs at LinkedIn only write 25% of the spec before they actually invite their cross-functional counterparts like design and engineering to weigh in. I think Christine responded to someone earlier, but like we are a very collaborative culture, and like a lot, like basically a lot of people in research and development have a seat at that table. So that's how I typically work.
Yeah, and sometimes actually there's some PMs that don't like write PRDs at all, and then like sometimes design has to kind of like bridge the gap there where it's like there's a hat. I mean that should probably never happen, but yeah, I think usually like product should always like kickstart that. But you can do it very collaboratively, like where you're like dropping designs into like the PRD early on. I've done that many times where there's like link to Figma files like in there too. So it's like this halfway in between. It should be really collaborative early on, but product should usually always be the one driving that from the beginning.
Sweet. And Christine, do you have anything else to say to that? I just want to make sure that I also get yours.
Oh yeah, no, they pretty much covered it. So I think it's good.
Sounds good. Okay, awesome. Jen asks, I'm a bootcamp student currently. I'm learning a lot right now, and I'm excited to keep learning and applying my new skills, but I am worried that my portfolio will not stand out. and there's a certain prejudice against boot camp students. Do you have any advice on standing out, do you have any colleagues that actually come from boot camps?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to this. And, you know, on my team personally, I hired a contractor who came straight from a boot camp too. So like, you know, there are opportunities. I think the discrimination that you guys are like might feel is sometimes there are requirements for like internships or like associate positions where they do require a 4-year degree or like you still being enrolled in school. And I mean, that's unfortunate, but that doesn't mean that, you know, your experiences are not valuable. I think with boot camp grads, some things that you can do to stand above the crowd, and not just for boot camp, this is just for anybody who's even in school even, is just trying to get some projects that demonstrate your ability to do things that are collaborative and potentially grounded in real life constraints. So that might mean go finding a hackathon and working with a team of engineers for a weekend to try to build an idea, or going to volunteer at your local nonprofit and helping them redesign their website and working off of their business constraints or something like that. Or like, you know, joining Code for America, Design for America, there's to work on like civic problems that are like real things. Those are really great experiences to supplement, because I think the issue is with junior portfolios is sometimes if they're all like, you know, student done projects on your own, it's just, they all kind of look the same after a while. So I think, you know, you have to kind of try to find those experiences to supplement that will really help you. That would just be my general advice. Kevin, I don't know about you if you have any things.
I was gonna say the same thing. It's, you know, try to find opportunities to, you know, do like projects like, you know, whether it's like nonprofits or, you know, even if it's just, you know, collaborating with like, you know, engineers that, you know, a hackathon, or, you know, anywhere you can kind of have work that's like not necessarily like this like schoolwork, because sometimes schoolwork can be like, or, you know, contractor work can be like very like academic, like this is like perfect, but like you want to have those experiences of what it's like to, you know, go through and ship something, like the problems and the trade-offs you have made. I think that would help you, you know, portfolio really stand out.
Yeah, for sure. And also just speaking to that, I feel like one thing that I've noticed as a design student is that there are so many opportunities out there. Hackathons. I know there's Brandathon that we've worked with and partnered with before. I feel like it's really like designing your journey to make sure that you're able to exercise and show off these skills regardless of what your background is. And I think that's so awesome to kind of just like take charge of your journey. And I actually have a question specific for Shu Yi. And Lizzie asks, can Shuyi elaborate on their comment about skills that come down to experience? This is regarding to the last topic on working with a good versus bad designer.
Yeah, for sure. So I believe I was speaking to storytelling and driving alignment. And I can give like one example, which is, we work a lot in our talent marketplace on building products around this notion of skills so that people, what we call users, members, job seekers, can stand out with skills more on their profiles or in other parts of the LinkedIn app. And what it comes down to is when I rely on any design counterpart to get anything done. Like at LinkedIn, it requires quite a lot of what we call alignment. Like we have to build on a lot of other surfaces. I mean, Kevin was talking about how his team built on one of Christine's surfaces on Pages. So one of the skills that really gets picked up over time and just with more context is, as a designer and as a PM on a team that isn't like completely owning the thing that you're working on, but you're actually relying on a partner team to say, yes, like I agree with you and you can build this thing and like totally makes sense, is that context. And you do gain that over time. You do get more storytelling skills over time. So that was kind of what I was referring to. And a lot of alignment is needed to make those decisions. So yeah, I hope that clarifies it a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe I can chime into Shui's example. Like some things that I see more junior designers do is sometimes it's really hard, like at a company like LinkedIn, people have really busy calendars, right? Because we're working on a ton of different initiatives. So sometimes I see junior designers, like they can't get all the right people in the room. So what they end up doing is meeting with one stakeholder at a time to get their perspective. Then they meet with another stakeholder from like a different team. So maybe they just meet with product, then they meet with engineering, and then they meet with product and then engineering for the other team that you're kind of building on the surface. And now the problem is you get the perspective from one piece of the puzzle from everything, but not collectively. And so you might be iterating on that feedback, but when you bring everybody in the room together, they're going to be like, wait a second, who told you to do this? Or like, why is this like this way? And if you had brought in the alignment of everybody in the first place, you could have avoided a lot of that churn for yourself as a designer, and having these meetings and having to do it in cycles and like going over and over again. So, you know, that's like an example of like how you can be more effective with your storytelling and collaboration.
Super cool. I feel like in a way, it's just like you're saying, storytelling and making sure everyone is just really on the same page, so that you do like smarter work instead of harder work. So I definitely hear that. And all right, so I have a question from Pushkar. And they ask, can you talk more on presenting the design based on the feedback we want to receive? I present my designs very open-ended. How can I improve on presenting the designs to stakeholders specifically? Kevin, if you want to answer that one.
I was just saying, yeah, I think it's about being clear about what kind of feedback you're looking for. Like you can say, like, I'm looking for directional feedback. Like, here's all these options. Like, I've definitely done that before, where it's like, here's the pros and cons of option A, option B, option C. You know, I'm looking for directional feedback. You know, given that. So I think it's really, you can be, you know, how, depending on where you're at in the life cycle of the project. If it's very early on and exploratory, you can ask for, you know, feedback helping you make a decision and direction. Or if it's literally down to like, you know, what do you think this flow or this part is better? You know, you can have it be very pointed feedback too. So I think it just depends on where you're at. If you are at the stage of the project where things are very open-ended, just, you know, like clarify that that's what you're looking for, your feedback.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to Kevin's point is you have to think about your audience too. You might have some really senior folks in there, like directors, who like don't really have a lot of context of the project. And then you might have your PM and your engineering partners who've been working with you almost on a daily basis, so know this stuff really well. But you need to bring that director along. So you have to provide some level of context around the goal that you guys are trying to achieve. What are some of the constraints that you're working with? Like, what is the timeline of this thing when it's going to be shipped? And like, then to Kevin's point, like asking for specific feedback based on the stage of where you are in the design process. So like, if you haven't gotten to visual design and copy yet, like you can tell people, please don't focus on this because I just want feedback on the interaction model or the flows to kind of determine our information architecture to move forward. And that's a really good way of facilitating it. The other thing as a designer, you know, you don't have to take all the feedback either. It's happening in a design review. So sometimes people might bring up something that's like interesting, but it's not really relevant. So it's okay to deflect that as a designer and just be like, you know, that's a really good thought, so-and-so, but let's table this discussion and kind of come back to it. And I'll follow up with you offline one-on-one. So it doesn't derail your entire design facilitation process.
Right. I remember, Kevin, you were saying something about like saying it's okay to say no too. I feel like that like comes back in my head a lot because I'm like, I want to please everybody, all of my stakeholders. Like, I feel like it's so hard to prioritize, you know, what you think is right. But I think it's a really good exercise in being able to really understand that for you and your particular situation, the problem you're trying to solve, like what the priorities are there. So thank you. Those are really insightful. And I think, okay, so Jana has a question for Kevin. Kevin, do you have any advice for navigating ambiguity or being overwhelmed as a UX designer? For example, when there's a mission and vision and the ultimate goal of the project is to redesign a product, but the tactics are unclear and PMs don't want to be prescriptive to us UX designers.
Yeah, definitely. And navigating ambiguity is a huge part of being a UX designer, you know, from even the earliest stages on to like being like, you know, the most senior. Yeah, I would say there is, whenever, there's a vision mission, make sure that you're clear and, your product partners are clear on what's the why, like, why are we doing this? Really try to understand that. And from there, I really try to understand, see if there's any either existing research that can help guide. I think user research is always good for clarity, to really help you understand, what are the pain points we're trying to solve? Why are we doing this? And, you could either go, go work with user research to try to answer those questions. And if you don't, see if there's anything you can leverage. And then I would say, take that kind of exploration phase, a discovery phase, to a point when you're like, this is like all the answers we're going to be able to get, like, unless we like, go do more research, we can't get any more clarity here. And then just get started and start, exploring options and stuff. I think that's one thing I struggled with, like, when I was a little bit more junior, is like staying in this discover phase for so long, trying to figure out and know everything. You get to a point where there's going to be some unknowns and you have to be uncomfortable with that, or comfortable with that, and just move forward and get started exploring.
Nice. That makes sense. I feel like I'm curious to know too, like, what your thoughts are on, like, if there are unknowns, like, is it fair to assume certain things as a designer? I know that's something that people do, like, especially like during, for lack of better example, like a whiteboard challenge, you have to assume certain things, whatever. And what are your thoughts on that? And like, how is it best to communicate whether or not, it's safe to make these assumptions?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Julia. And honestly, that's sometimes a challenge that we have at LinkedIn. Like, when we're doing like maybe a venture bet kind of idea where there's like no data whatsoever, like users have never seen this thing even out in the place, like you can't actually do research effectively to get like a perspective. So at that point, when you're kind of working on those types of projects, you have to just be okay sometimes with launching it and like thinking about it as a strategy where it's like, can you A/B test into this thing to kind of get you some data? Shuyi also talked about like ramp plans, right? Instead of launching it to everybody, can you launch this to a very small segment of people that you think might use this product, and then kind of wait to see the quantitative feedback and the qualitative feedback from it, and then you use that as your basis to make some assumptions off of. Because I think for designers, yes, in reality, we learn that we need to do research for everything, but in reality, you can't always for everything. So you have to be able to like, just make those choices, educated choices as well, to just be okay in launching it too.
Sweet. That's awesome. And Yvonne, I think this is one of our last questions. Make sure to have any other questions that you want us answered in the chat, you all. But Yvonne says, how do you bring everyone to the meeting so everyone is in alignment if everyone's on completely different schedules and working from home? I think that's a really good question that we're still trying to answer.
Yeah.
For your tactics.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I could start, and then Shuyi and Kevin, feel free to chime in around your perspectives on this too. But the thing is, actually, not everybody is a stakeholder. You have to realize that too. Like, yes, everybody you want to inform of your designs and what's going on, but there's only actually a handful of people who really have to make the decision around like whether you guys move forward or not. So one of the things when you first start a project is to really understand, it's something we called a rapid, to understand like the roles and responsibilities of who is like involved and like who are the stakeholders that you need. Have that kind of laid out in your mind, and that really helps you decide when you're facilitating meetings who are the absolute people that you need. And sometimes like I can't get a director into my design reviews for my team, but I know they're going to want to see it. So I actually talk to them before that meeting happens and send them it via email or Slack and be like, I know you're not available. Here are the designs. Let us know if there's any concerns or feedback you want us to address beforehand. Are you okay with us proceeding without you? And usually kind of getting that input helps us. And that kind of like builds the trust with that individual. If they're not there, they're still being heard. And then if you get the other stakeholders in the room, you can still at least make the decision and go forward. I think the most important part is knowing who is the decision maker though.
Got it. Great. And do Kevin and Shuyi, do either of you have like any other things to chime in within that question?
Yeah, just one big, I feel you. during COVID, it is so hard to drive alignment. And it is like, especially at LinkedIn, we are like constantly trying to find some working across like multiple teams to get to a decision. So what we try to do more of these days is making sure when we like fewer decisions being made in one-on-ones, because like when you do that, then like other counterparts that really are core stakeholders may not be totally caught up and like don't feel like it's efficient to be like informed of this decision later. And then secondly, like we are really trying to abide, at least on my team, by like the email rule, where if it takes like 4 or 5 email exchanges to just keep debating, we'll just schedule a meeting. We'll make sure we pull both teams. Let's just say if we're building on like a different surface altogether, and then just driving that alignment through like weekly updates if needed.
Yeah, I'd add to that too. Similarly, like we're always looking at different ways we can like make sure everybody's voice is heard and perspective is heard, and then make a decision. One thing we've been doing on our team, which is pretty nice, is in some of those PRDs, we like literally have a table where it's like open questions, everyone's perspective, so you can just add it in there, so you can see, and people can go in there and +1 it or like disagree, and then we'll obviously meet on that too. But it's nice that you can kind of have it like everyone can sit and like read each other's perspectives and comment on it, rather than just like sometimes meetings can go really quickly. Not some people are louder in meetings than others, so not everyone has a chance to get in there. So that's been something I think that's been really helpful on our team.
Yeah, and Julia, if this is our last question, I'd actually like to ask the audience some stuff too, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the whole chat that we had about quality, and I saw some folks writing about LinkedIn specifically. So I feel like we have some extra time. You guys do have the product and design team here. So I want to give folks an opportunity to maybe just like surface some of those things so that we can like, provide that feedback back to our teams.
Yeah. Kevin says it's Ask AMA LinkedIn. All right, time to surface those, the reasoning behind those suggestions, or not suggestions even, just comments.
Yeah, or if people want to unmute themselves, I mean, we can totally make this casual. They don't have to type it up too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has that question, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I would say that, so previously LinkedIn, when it is not at full browser width, the right panel would always kind of overlap the main feed and kind of block the content there. Since then, it's been kind of fixed. But now the news feed panel at browser half width goes over the left panel, which is where your groups and your recents are. So not nearly as important in terms of hierarchy, but still buggy. So like it's been this way for I think years, right? It was years this way for the right panel, and then in the update you fixed that, but the main panel is now the issue. So I think like when you're talking about quality, that's sort of what comes to mind, right? Because it's not necessarily a design issue, but to me it speaks about the QA quality of it and whether or not design is involved in the QA.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Simon, thanks for that feedback. We'll definitely take note of that one. And that just sounds like maybe a technical bug. So we can submit that to the team. I don't know, Kevin, if that's actually your team, somebody from the news or the feed team. So
yeah, it's on content experience. My broad team it is. Yeah.
Okay. So Kevin, I'm giving you action.
We're like taking notes now.
I know.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Simon. And also, I want to make sure too that we get Yvonne. I believe your hand is raised.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to LinkedIn, you guys are obviously like the focus is hub for like communication when it comes to business and companies and development, which you guys have kind of been at the forefront. So you guys have a lot, my experience on the website is that you guys have a lot of features that are buried and hidden to the point that sometimes I have to pause, go to YouTube and like figure out how to just navigate and get to what I want to get to. So how are you guys, like the design team, the UX designer and the product designers, how are you guys approaching simplifying that for the users?
Yeah, and maybe Yvonne, could you give me an example of like, you know, what's something that you're having like a hard time locating, just to kind of help me think about the mindset of the flow you're going through?
Sure, absolutely. Good. Yeah, thanks. So, for example, videos. So, I have a business coach and she's a rock star. Great. She posted a video on her particular LinkedIn. I saw the video, but when I went to her profile, I couldn't find it. I had the coaching session with her and I was like, hey, I saw this video. You posted on LinkedIn. I went on your profile. I can't find it. And she's like, well, you have to go all the way down at the bottom. You have to like click on this, click on this, click on this. And then there's a listing of all like the videos and other videos that I've linked to my profile, but it was 3 clicks buried deep. And I was like, why? LinkedIn, why? So yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks for, oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I can take that one without giving too much away. Well aware of that issue is all I'll say. Yeah, hopefully we'll be making some changes soon for that. But you're not alone in hearing that. We hear that feedback quite frequently in relation to finding content in the profile.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I was actually gonna, if that's all right, piggyback on Yvonne's, because my feedback was very similar in the fact that like, it's great to see stories about people commenting or posting comments on the home screen. But if you ever try to find that post again, it's really difficult to find. And also I love LinkedIn because I love looking at job postings of jobs I will never apply for. Like I'm always like, what is required for a helicopter pilot or something like that? And I just really love reading job listings. So I use LinkedIn all the time, but most of my friends are like, oh, I only use LinkedIn when I'm looking for a job. And they talk about how they have to like reactivate their profile and like only use it when they're looking for a job. And I feel like having that weird mixture of like, how do you promote your business if you can't find those posts? And how do you use LinkedIn when you're not looking for a job? Those are kind of like codependent issues in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's a good question, Chelsea. And I think that's definitely, as a team, we're actually trying to change LinkedIn in a way to be more emphasized on those active communities that you're talking about, around those conversations, finding the posts and stuff like that. I think, you know, if you looked at LinkedIn 5 years ago, yes, like a lot of people did think of it as explicitly like a resume site or a job hunting site. So there's a lot of investments going on right now across different teams on our core like consumer side that is actually trying to build some of these things that you're talking about by making content more discoverable and more at the forefront of like the experience for users when they log into LinkedIn. So yeah, appreciate that feedback. I think that's really good to hear that we're kind of moving in that direction.
Yeah, that's actually something really interesting that you bring up, because I know that not a lot of my peers, at least in my cohort at school, are using LinkedIn right now. And I'm like, dude, like, it's where it's at. Like, I don't know if you know, but it's where it's at. And like, I know that I also get the, when I was like interviewing people and asking them, you know, about like their experience with LinkedIn, they only think about that one aspect of like, it's just about finding a job. When in reality, from my understanding of LinkedIn's values, you know, it's like about sharing your experiences and really just connecting to people that you know. And so it's really cool to also hear kind of on the flip side, Christine, that, you know, that LinkedIn is doing what they can to kind of like nurture these other aspects that are not necessarily like as obvious to other people who aren't on LinkedIn right now. So I think that it's really awesome to hear that as well.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is, I specifically sit on the job seeking team. So if that's serving you well, then great. If not, like, always so happy to hear this feedback. But the thing that even our team is realizing is like, and it's in line with what Christine mentioned, is like building active communities, is we are actually working on some changes to make LinkedIn more relevant at every stage of your career. So it's not just about job search. It's about literally like when you land the job and you're hired in your first 90 days, what is going to happen next? And like, how can LinkedIn be more of a resource for you, both from a content perspective, but also from helping you connect to other people who are experts in the field that you can learn from and continue to gain skills to get to that next level. So it's definitely super top of mind. And if you have like product ideas on like how we could do that better, please. And by the way, I think I got a couple Zoom chats. I'm more than happy to connect with anyone on how like LinkedIn can better help your job search, both personally and professionally. And I think I would speak for Christine and Kevin a little bit too, where we're so delighted to be here and happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I believe that is everyone that raised their hands or wanted to speak. But thank you so much, Christine, for being so open and like basically like opening the floor and getting like feedback. That was awesome. That was like so like out of the blue, but I love that. Like I feel like, you know, a huge thing about our design community is that, you know, we're open to speak vulnerably. And I feel like that was a beautiful example of how that can be done in a way that, you know, is very collaborative and very respectful. And so I love that. So thank you so much. And a huge thank you, by the way, from the Students of UXD community to LinkedIn. Thank you, Christine, Kevin, Shuyi, for spending your Friday afternoon here with us. I'm sure everyone can say that, you know, they learned at least one thing. I know I learned a lot. And I am just really happy and grateful for your time here, really. And yeah, I mean, everyone, if there's anything else you'd like to say, I'm sure, like Shuyi said, feel free to connect with these people on LinkedIn, you guys. There's a reason why their names are on the screen. So make sure to connect with them. Don't forget to share your takeaways with us. I'm sure they would love to hear what you got from this event. And yes, thank you so much for coming, you guys. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Watch that Super Bowl, make those cookies, make those carne asada nachos. I remember that. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.